Her son handed the nurse a check and told her not to get the dosage wrong. Marion Bell, 81 and fading, heard everything from her hospital bed. The nurse took the money. Then she took notes. By the time the morphine was measured, so was his intent. She lived. And when he walked into court, smiling, she was already on the witness list. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The beep of the heart monitor was slow but steady. Too steady. It hummed like an unwanted guest, lingering in Loretta Miles's ears as she peeled her eyelids open against the sterile overhead light. Her throat burned. Her mouth tasted of metal and bile. The hospital ceiling stared back at her, beige and impersonal. Then movement. A shadow in scrubs leaned over her IV line, fingers twitching as they adjusted the drip rate. Loretta blinked harder. It was Chantel, pale, sweating through her uniform. Her hands shook as she turned a valve that clicked too fast. "You're awake," Chantel whispered, voice quivering. Loretta's lips cracked as she formed the question, "What happened?" "You reacted wrong," Chantel murmured, eyes darting to the door. I need to fix it before the doctor rounds." Loretta's gaze slid to the IV bag. Her instincts flared, cold and professional. Once a nurse, always a nurse. And that drip rate? Wrong. That dose? Way off. She didn't remember authorizing anything like this. Hell, she didn't remember asking for any sedatives. Her veins tingled, a numbness crawling down her arm like an itch she couldn't scratch. "Chantel," she rasped, "what was in that bag?" But Chantel didn't answer. She tightened the line and fumbled with the tubing, then turned away so fast her badge swung sideways. The door clicked behind her before Loretta could form another word. A moment later, the doctor walked in, a man she didn't know, flipping through a chart with lips pursed tight. "Mrs. Miles, good to see your eyes open. That was close. You had what looks like a reaction to a duplicated dose of midazolam. It's rare, but dangerous at your age." Loretta's stomach dropped. She swallowed, trying to sit up. "I didn't take any." The doctor glanced at her, puzzled. "Your chart showed the dose logged at 9:30 last night. It matches the records." "No," Loretta said, strength returning to her voice. "I never asked for anything to help me sleep." He didn't argue. He just made a note and smiled like he was humoring a senile woman. When he left, silence filled the room again, except for the low hiss of oxygen and that same cursed beeping. Loretta stared at the IV bag still half full above her head. Something wasn't right, and she didn't need charts or polite doctors to tell her what her own body already knew. She'd been drugged. And not by accident. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. This time, familiar ones, measured, deliberate. A woman stepped into view in a charcoal gray pantsuit, her silver hair pulled into a twist that hadn't budged all morning. Miriam K. Loretta exhaled slowly. "God, you came fast." "I do that when someone tries to kill my oldest friend," Miriam said without a smile, setting her leather satchel on the chair beside the bed. "You didn't fall into this, Loretta. Someone pushed." Loretta studied her friend's face. There was no softness there today, just something steely and coiled beneath the surface. "I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck," Loretta whispered. "Then I saw Chantel at my fourth. Scared as hell." Miriam leaned in, voice low. "We'll figure it out, but first you need to stay alive." Loretta looked toward the window. A breeze moved the blinds gently, just enough for her to see the reflection in the glass. Herself, gaunt, paler than usual, but not broken, not yet. From the table beside her bed, her phone buzzed once, screen lighting up with a number she didn't recognize. She reached for it with trembling fingers. A text flashed across the screen. "He offered me 20 grand. I didn't do it, but I need to talk. See." Loretta's breath caught. Her hand tightened around the phone as she looked up at Miriam. "We're not guessing anymore," she said coldly. "We're hunting." The next morning, Loretta insisted on her reading glasses. Miriam handed them over without asking questions. "Let me guess," Miriam said, pulling up a chair beside her. "You're going straight to the logs." Loretta nodded, already flipping through the leather-bound notebook she'd insisted be kept at the nurse's station. A daily ritual for her, even in retirement. Document everything. Old habits die harder than old nurses. Her hands were slower now, fingers stiffer than they used to be, but her eye was as sharp as ever. Here. Her finger landed on the entry for 9:30 p.m., the night of the overdose. That's not my handwriting. Miriam leaned in. The pen pressure was wrong. Lighter, the loops too round. Someone had forged the entry. Midazolam, 2 milligrams, per patient request. I never requested a damn thing, Loretta whispered. Miriam said nothing. She pulled out her phone and began taking photos, one after the other. Loretta's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She opened it. Burner. He offered me $20,000. I stalled. He said, no witnesses. I recorded part of it. I don't know what to do. Miriam read over her shoulder. She's scared. She should be, Loretta said, then hit forward and sent the message to Miriam's encrypted legal inbox. I want that backed up 6 ways to Sunday. Miriam nodded, already opening her laptop. I'll start pulling your financials too. If money changed hands, there's always a trail. Texts like that, voice memos. We're going to need everything. Loretta stared at her reflection in the black screen of her phone. He knew I kept that log, she murmured. He's seen me update it. Hell, he's mocked me for it. Miriam kept typing. Loretta leaned back and closed her eyes for a beat. Derek's visits replayed in her mind like a highlight reel she'd never agreed to watch. Rushed hugs, guilt-coated smiles, the way his eyes never stayed on her for long, but always seemed to linger on the locked cabinet in the corner of the room. He'd brought her soup 3 days ago, clam chowder, her favorite, except it was cold in the center. He'd barely sat with her 10 minutes before checking his phone and ducking out, saying something about traffic and invoices. He hadn't even kissed her goodbye, just tapped her arm and said, "Rest up." And now a bribe. A hit. From her own flesh and blood. Miriam tapped the table to get her attention. "Loretta, I need to ask, do you have power of attorney records on file?" "I do," she said. "Old ones. From when Walter was alive. Derek never updated his copy, though. Thought it was a nuisance." "Well, that nuisance may be the only reason you still own your house," Miriam replied. "We need clean documentation. Updated. You name me or someone you trust." Loretta narrowed her eyes. "You." Miriam looked up. "Loretta, that puts me in the center of this." "That's exactly where I want you," Loretta said, "and Derek can rot in the sidelines." Outside the hospital room, rain had started to patter against the window. Gentle at first, then harder. A summer storm rolling in without warning. "I'm going to ask Chantel to come in," Miriam said. "Not to the hospital yet, but somewhere quiet. If she has that voice memo and if she's ready to talk, we have grounds to press charges." "She's still scared," Loretta said. "She should be, but fear's a doorway. Either you walk through it or it locks behind you." Loretta turned her head toward the rain. Her hand curled over the edge of the bedside table. "I know Derek. He won't stop just because it didn't work the first time." Miriam looked at her. "That's why we don't wait. We build a case before he realizes we're building anything." There was a pause. Then Miriam leaned in, her voice low, lethal. "But to do this right, we need Chantel's full testimony. We don't get that. We have nothing." Loretta didn't flinch. A new buzz broke the silence. Another message from the burner phone lit up the screen. "He's getting suspicious. I'm running out of time." Loretta stared at it, her pulse quickening. "She's either going to save me," she said quietly, "or go down with him." The next visitor didn't knock. Just barged in like it was a Sunday pot roast, and not a hospital room in the middle of a criminal storm. "Ma!" Derek's voice boomed, too loud, too cheerful. "There she is. You scared me half to death." Loretta swallowed her nausea. It wasn't from the meds this time. He carried a plastic bag from the corner deli, her favorite, their old spot. She recognized the smell before she saw the label, French onion soup, garlic bread wrapped in foil. "You didn't have to come," she said flatly. He ignored her tone, dragged the visitor chair closer with a squeak, and set the bag on her tray. "I know how hospital food is. Figured I'd treat my favorite girl." Loretta gave him a weak smile, careful not to let it reach her eyes. "So thoughtful." He sat, elbows on knees, Too comfortable for a son who'd just learned his mother nearly died. "Doc says you're doing great. Must be those country genes. Or good record-keeping," she said lightly. He chuckled. "Still with that little logbook? You're a piece of work." Loretta smiled again. Inside, her stomach churned. Derek reached for the soup, began unsealing the lid. "Seriously, Ma, you've got to think about the future. I mean, none of us are getting younger." There it was, the hook hiding behind the bread and butter. "Future?" she asked. "You know, wills, estate stuff. Maybe it's time to just have it all in one place, you know? For peace of mind." He tore open a napkin, avoided eye contact. "Don't want things getting messy later." Loretta tilted her head like she was pondering it. "Good idea," she said. "You always were the organized one." Derek beamed like a boy who got gold stars for pretending to clean his room. Behind him, the door creaked open. Miriam stepped in quietly, her presence sharp as a scalpel. She didn't greet Derek, just stood in the corner, watching. Loretta caught the flicker of unease in her son's eyes when he noticed her. Just for a second. He stood. "Miriam, always a pleasure." "I wish I could say the same," she said dryly. He smirked and patted Loretta's hand. "All right, Ma. I'll let you rest. Soup's hot. Eat while it's fresh, okay?" Loretta nodded. When the door closed behind him, her shoulders dropped. Miriam raised an eyebrow. "That was smooth. You ever consider poker?" "I'm playing the long game," Loretta muttered. Her phone buzzed again. A voice memo this time. She opened it and played it low on speaker. Chantel's voice was strained, whispered but clear. "I told him I'd do it this week. He said, 'Make it look clean, no questions.' I stalled. I said the meds were delayed. He wired me half the money already." The message cut off in static. Loretta closed her eyes. Miriam was already reaching into her bag, pulling out a portable drive and cable. "We transfer everything. Now secure server. This can't live in a cloud." Minutes later, the files were uploading while the two women sat in brittle silence. Then came the knock. A new face. Mid-40s, square build, soft but unreadable eyes. He wore a plaid button-down and a badge clipped to his belt. "Rowan, detective." "I'm Officer Rowan," he said, stepping inside without fanfare. "Ms. K sent me the memo. I just reviewed the audio." Loretta sat straighter. "Can you confirm it's him?" Rowan nodded. "Voice analysis software confirms with high likelihood that it's Derek Miles. You have enough here to start a file, but it's fragile. It depends on her." "Chantel," Loretta said softly. "She's the linchpin," Rowan confirmed. "If she flips or disappears, this whole thing folds." Miriam shut the laptop. "She won't. We won't let her." Loretta's phone buzzed again. Another burner text. But this one was shorter. "He's watching me now. I think he knows." Loretta's hands went cold. Miriam looked up. "We just moved from suspicion to survival." The DA's office was housed in an old brick building with bad lighting and worse coffee. Miriam K. walked through the double glass doors like she'd built the place herself. Prosecutor Elliot Banks was already waiting in conference room 2, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. A man who looked like he hadn't smiled in 3 years and didn't intend to start now. He didn't stand when she entered, just gestured toward the chair opposite him. "If this is about a deal, let's not waste time." Miriam dropped a file the width of a phone book onto the table. "It's not a deal. It's leverage." Banks raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She tapped the top page. Burner phone screenshots. Timestamps matched to security logs. Voice memo. "Derek Miles soliciting a medical homicide. Payment logs show a $10,000 wire already delivered. There's another voice memo being transcribed." Banks flipped through it with the eye of someone who'd buried men with less. "She's the nurse?" he asked. "Chantel Ross, licensed, employed by an agency. No record, no priors. Scared, but clean. And she's willing to testify? She's ready to sign a sworn statement, but she wants immunity, both criminal and civil." Banks leaned back, studying her. "You know I can't give full blanket immunity until I hear it myself. She'll give it, on record. No coaxing." "You're sure?" Miriam gave a small, dry smile. "I'm never sure. I'm prepared." Banks tapped a pen on the folder. I want her under protective custody if we move forward. Low profile, somewhere Derek won't look. She won't run. She wants to make it right. She better. By late afternoon, Chantel sat in a side office at Miriam's firm, face pale, hair pulled back tight, hands folded like she was praying. The recorder clicked on. Chantel's voice cracked once but didn't break. He offered 20 grand, said it'd be painless, just a little too much sedative. He knew I needed the money. I told him I'd think about it. I never planned to follow through. I stalled. I lied to buy time. She laid out the timeline, the phone calls, the Cash App, her fear, Loretta's kindness. Then she signed the statement with a trembling hand. When she finished, Miriam pressed her shoulder gently. It's done. A few hours later, Loretta's hospital room phone rang. An old beige unit with a cord that curled like a sleeping snake. She picked it up. Hello? Hey, Ma. Derek. She stiffened, but kept her tone warm. Hi, sweetheart. I was thinking, maybe it's time to let this go. All of it. Whatever happened, let's just forget the past. Start fresh after you're out. I'll help get the house cleaned up. We'll sit on the porch like we used to. Loretta stared out the window at the clouds rolling in. You really think we can start over? She asked softly. Yeah. Why not? His voice brightened too quickly. Clean slate. Family first. Always. Loretta looked at the blinking red light on the burner phone beside her. She pressed record. All right, she said gently. Let's see where things go. He sighed, relieved. You're the best, Ma. I'll swing by tomorrow. When the line disconnected, she set the phone down carefully, like it was made of glass. Miriam, seated by the window, didn't look up from her laptop. That was fast. He's testing the water, Loretta said. He feels it shifting. Miriam shut her laptop. It's time to update your will. Loretta raised a brow. We already set that. Quietly, Miriam said. This time, we don't just move the money. We take his name off everything. Permanently. Executor, beneficiary, power of attorney, every trace, before he sees the playbook. Loretta nodded slowly. The wheels were turning now. Quiet, precise, but ruthless. As the sun dipped below the horizon, her phone buzzed again. A new message. From Chantel. He just called me. Asked if I'd gotten cold feet. He's trying to reel me back in. Loretta looked at Miriam, her voice low and certain. If he's testing her too, we're not the only ones building a case anymore. The Chase Bank statement came in encrypted. Officer Rowan brought it himself, tucked in a sealed evidence envelope, no courier, no email. He placed it on the small conference table in Miriam's office like it was a loaded weapon. Transfer hit 3 days before the overdose attempt, he said. Exact amount, $20,000. Memo line said, consultation fee. Miriam peeled back the seal. Loretta leaned forward slowly, eyes scanning the neat columns. Consultation? She said bitterly. He must have thought that would cover the smell. Rowan didn't respond. He pulled a notepad from his breast pocket. We need your timeline. Every dose, every gap, everything you remember from that week. Loretta reached into her handbag and pulled out 2 things. Her logbook and a typed printout of her daily medical routine. Vitamins, pressure meds, evening sedatives, dosage windows, and 1 line highlighted in yellow, midazolam not prescribed or authorized at any time. She handed it over like a confession. Rowan skimmed it, nodded. This is good, better than most nursing home records I see. Loretta gave him a tight smile. I used to keep people alive for a living. Habit dies hard. Chantel arrived through the side entrance with her agency liaison. No scrubs today, just jeans, a gray hoodie, and a face drained of color. She clutched the burner phone like it was a live grenade. Rowan slid a small evidence bag across the table. Chantel didn't speak. She placed the phone inside, sealed the bag herself, and pushed it back. She changed the lock code 2 nights ago, Miriam whispered to Loretta. That's when she knew he was close. Rowan tucked the phone away. We'll pull the metadata, GPS, cloud backups, if any. Loretta exhaled slowly, gaze locked on the frost-blurred window across the room. He wired her blood money through his business account? Miriam gave a grim nod. He wanted it to look clean, but that label, consultation, ties it right to her license. It's what tipped compliance at the bank. Loretta blinked once. He's sloppy when he's impatient. She reached for the final folder sitting beside her tea. Already notarized, already signed by 2 witnesses. Her new estate documents. She flipped it open, removed the top page, and handed it directly to Miriam. Executor, everything. Don't let anyone near it but you. Miriam hesitated. Loretta? Do it, she said sharply. I'm not handing him keys to a kingdom I built with a man who actually loved me. Her voice cracked slightly at that last word, and suddenly she wasn't 72 and surgical. She was younger, softer, married again. Her eyes glazed and her voice softened. You remember how Walter used to talk about Derek? She said. He always said, you spoil him. He'll think love comes with an invoice. Miriam's throat tightened. I laughed when he said it, Loretta went on, told him not to be so dramatic. But one night, maybe a year before he passed, he sat me down, real serious, said, if anything happens to me, make sure that boy earns it. Don't let him touch your legacy unless he understands what it's worth. Rowan lowered his eyes respectfully. Loretta closed the file. Walter was right, she said. It's not Derek's name on this house, this land, this history. It's mine. And it'll stay that way. The door creaked open. Miriam's assistant stepped in with a tablet. New filing from the DA's office, she said. Grand jury moved up. They're filing for full criminal court proceedings. Loretta froze. Rowan blinked. Already? Miriam swiped through the tablet, her eyes narrowing. They're using Chantel's immunity as leverage. This locks her testimony into the record, admissible in court whether she recants or not. Loretta stood slowly, breath sharp in her lungs. He's going to know, she said. Once this hits, there's no clean slate talk. No porch swings, no second chances. Miriam glanced at Rowan. It's on record now. He's officially in the system. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy to commit. Loretta turned toward the window, watching dusk roll in over the parking lot. A black SUV idled across the street, unmarked. Familiar silhouette. She didn't blink. Let him watch, she whispered. He thinks this ends in inheritance. But I'm not dying on anyone's timeline. The envelope was thick and unforgiving, delivered by hand. Miriam opened it in Loretta's hospital room with surgical care, as if any sudden motion might detonate its contents. Grand jury returned the bill this morning, she said, voice even. Indictment for attempted murder, financial fraud, medical conspiracy. Loretta didn't flinch. She sat upright in bed, eyes clear, voice even. Took them long enough. Miriam laid the papers gently on her lap. He's officially under pre-trial investigation. The prosecutor will move to have him picked up for questioning within the next 48 hours. Outside the window, a lawn crew was trimming hedges. Loretta watched the blades spin, chewing through branches like time itself, methodical, irreversible. He'll run his mouth first, she said, then run altogether. 3 hours later, he did the former. Local radio picked up the first statement, a pre-recorded phone interview with a morning host who owed Derek favors from his failed HVAC business sponsorship. My mom's confused. She's 72. She's been in and out of hospitals, meds, machines. People forget. They make mistakes. Doesn't mean someone tried to hurt her. The host chuckled nervously. But attempted murder's a serious charge. Derek's voice, warm like honey-covered razors. I love my mother. I visit her more than anyone. You don't do that if you're trying to get rid of somebody. You do it when they start slipping. Miriam stood in front of a small crowd in the county courthouse press bay later that day, Loretta by her side in a navy sweater and scarf, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Miriam held up a slim, well-worn book. This is Loretta Miles's daily log. Medication doses, food intake, physical symptoms, weather conditions, every day for 5 years, cross-referenced with her pharmacy refills and Fitbit records. She flipped open a page. 3 days before the incident, she wrote, quote, Derek brought soup again. Didn't stay long. Watched the cabinet. 3rd time this month. End quote. The reporters went quiet. Even the clicking stopped. By the following evening, Derek's high school buddies had scrubbed him from their Facebook photos. One former friend posted a vague status. Some folks don't understand karma till it walks in through the front door wearing a warrant. His wife, Melissa, deleted her profile altogether. Word around town was she'd packed up and left with their daughter to stay with her sister near Raleigh. Loretta didn't say anything when Miriam told her, just nodded once and turned back to her tea. She waited until the sun went down before calling the DMV. "I need the title transferred," she said. "The Ford Escape. I want it off my name by morning." "It's in your son's possession, correct?" "Yes, but it's mine. I paid cash. No lien. You'll see the proof in your system." There was a pause on the other end. "We can start the surrender process. You'll need to fill—" "Already done. I just need the plate pulled. If he drives it, it's on him now." The house got quiet after that. Hazel, the night nurse, checked her vitals and fluffed the pillows without asking questions. Miriam worked quietly by the window, typing up a summary to forward to the DA. Loretta sat in bed, watching the fire from the little electric heater curl orange in its tin belly. Everything burned slower now, but it burned. She opened her journal, the newest one, leather-bound and still fresh. She wrote one line: "He gambled on me forgetting. But I was born remembering." Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just 4 words. "You made a mistake." No name. No context. But she knew the tone. She knew the threat. And she knew exactly who sent it. She turned the screen toward Miriam. "He knows it's real now," Loretta said. Miriam looked up from her laptop, face unreadable. "No," she said quietly. "Now he knows it's permanent." The courthouse smelled like floor wax and old paper. Cold air drifted through the lobby vents with the bite of something institutional. Loretta had been in courtrooms before. Nursing lawsuits, malpractice cases, once even a landlord dispute. But never like this, not when her son was the one in shackles. She sat in the second row, Miriam to her left, Hazel to her right. Hazel's hand rested gently on her forearm, a quiet tether. The woman didn't speak, didn't pry. She was simply present, a steady warmth in a room made of concrete and judgment. Derek shuffled in, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. His orange jumpsuit looked out of place against the dark wood paneling. He didn't look toward Loretta, not even once. The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. "Case number 2300451, State of North Carolina versus Derek Miles." Prosecutor Elliot Banks stood, crisp in a navy suit, one hand resting on a thick manila folder. "The defendant is charged with 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 1 count of financial fraud targeting an elder, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit felony harm through medical manipulation." Loretta didn't blink. Derek's court-appointed attorney, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, rose. "Your Honor, Mr. Miles pleads not guilty to all charges." There was no gasp from the courtroom, just the quiet click of a journalist's pen and the rustle of paper from the press section. The judge, a woman with crow's feet and no patience, looked over her glasses. "Noted. Bail is set at $350,000, bond only. Defendant is not to contact the victim or associated witnesses in any way, directly or through intermediaries." Derek's lips twitched. Just for a second. That old arrogance surfaced, then vanished beneath the weight of the moment. From the side door, Chantel entered, escorted by Officer Rowan. She wore a navy dress coat, hair pinned back. She looked smaller than Loretta remembered, like fear had hollowed her out. But when she caught Loretta's gaze, she nodded once, then took her seat in the witness section, chin high. The courtroom lights seemed to buzz louder as Prosecutor Banks laid out a preliminary overview for the media transcript. Derek had offered payment for a fabricated medical overdose, used a business account to conceal the transfer, and leveraged a family relationship to access prescription settings. A calculated, emotionally manipulative attempt to expedite financial gain by means of silencing his own mother, Banks said. "It's not just criminal, it's cruel." The phrase hit like a slap. Even the courtroom stenographer's fingers paused for a beat. Outside, the reporters had already started circling. Loretta saw them through the tall windows, young ones, with cameras slung over shoulders and microphones clutched in bare hands. By noon, the headlines were crawling across local news. Son accused in inheritance attempt scheme. Greensboro woman survives alleged medical. Hit Da. A calculated act of cruelty. By sundown, it hit the national wire. Melissa filed for divorce the next morning. A legal notice was delivered to Derek's attorney. Separation of assets, emergency custody petition, cited irreconcilable betrayal of trust, criminal endangerment, and reckless financial behavior. When Loretta read the line, she didn't cry. She simply turned to Miriam and said, "One more thing off my shoulders." Miriam gave a small nod. "The ship's sinking. She just jumped early." That night, as the courthouse lights dimmed, Hazel made Loretta her tea, cinnamon and valerian, same as always, and turned on the porch light out of habit. But Loretta stayed in the dark. She watched her own son's face flicker across the 10 o'clock news, flanked by stills of his mugshot and the damning quote from the prosecutor. Then she noticed something new. A reporter standing outside the courthouse mentioned a leak. A source close to the investigation confirms the prosecution may be adding new charges based on electronic communications and an alleged second attempt. Loretta turned down the volume. "Second attempt?" Hazel noticed. "What is it?" Loretta didn't answer. She picked up her phone, opened the burner thread, scrolled back to the message that chilled her the most. "You made a mistake." She stared at it, fingers trembling slightly. Miriam had said it was a threat, but now Loretta wasn't sure. Maybe it wasn't a warning. Maybe it was a promise. Rain lashed against Miriam's office windows like a warning, the kind of southern summer storm that rolled in with no invitation and stayed just long enough to ruin your plans. But inside, the lights stayed warm, the legal pads kept filling, and no one flinched. Chantel sat stiffly at the edge of the couch, legs pressed together, shoulders tense. She hadn't worn makeup in days. Her hands twisted the hem of her sleeve with mechanical repetition. Loretta sat across from her at the round table, a blanket over her lap, legal file open like a menu of trauma. Miriam paced, reading aloud from the witness prep folder. "You'll be asked about the payment. Don't elaborate. Let the audio speak for itself. Keep your answers short. Factual. Calm." "I can do that," Chantel said, but her voice caught on the last word. Miriam looked at her. "Fear is allowed. Folding isn't." Chantel nodded. Loretta gave her a quiet look, one that said, "You walk through this, or you never stop running." Later that night, Loretta sat alone at her kitchen table, a yellow legal pad in front of her and a teacup cooling beside it. The fire in the hearth had long gone out, but she hadn't moved. She was writing a letter, not to the court, to Derek. Her pen scratched slowly across the paper. "You were the first thing I ever loved that scared me back. You studied me like a patient chart, symptoms, weaknesses, allergies. Then you prescribed yourself the cure. My absence. But I'm still here, Derek. I'm still here." She folded the letter, slid it into a plain white envelope, and tucked it into the back of her journal. No address, no stamp. Just a ghost she wanted to cage on paper. At the precinct the next day, Officer Rowan leaned against the wall of the evidence room, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the logbook that had been tagged, numbered, and bagged. "Chain of custody's tight," he told Miriam. "Nothing tampered. Chantel's phone, the voice memos, the account transfer logs, they all line up. Jury's going to see it in sequence, and it's clean." Miriam exhaled through her nose. "We just need to hold her together long enough to get her through Cross," he nodded, "and keep him from blowing something up before the trial opens." 2 hours later, the lab results came in. Miriam handed Loretta the sealed envelope without a word. Loretta read it, lips thinning as she skimmed the lines. Midazolam present in bloodstream at 2.8 milligrams, administered within a 2-hour window, not consistent with a dosing error, not a mistake, a move, deliberate, surgical, timed. She handed it back and looked out the window. He almost got it right. Then the final card dropped. Rowan called Miriam just before midnight. "You need to see this," he said. "Now." She arrived at the station in sweats and a coat. He met her at the back entrance, eyes sharp, jaw tight. He handed her a printout. Banking records flagged under Derek's name from a third-party broker. "Life insurance policy," Rowan said. $250,000 payout. Purchased 5 days before the overdose attempt. "Beneficiary?" Miriam asked, already knowing. "Derek Miles." Her stomach turned. He took out a life policy on her like it was a plane ticket. No known pre-approval from Loretta. It's fraud unless he forged consent. Miriam stared at the date again. 5 days. That wasn't panic. That was planning. "We'll call the insurance company in the morning," Rowan said, but Miriam already knew what came next. Back at the house, Loretta sat on her porch, alone under a blanket as the rain softened into mist. The old wind chime her husband had hung over the porch, bent copper and a little rusted, whispered across the breeze. She watched the road. Not for a car, for what came after. Her phone buzzed once, a voicemail. Unknown number. She pressed play. Derek's voice crackled through the static, slower this time, controlled. "I really hope you enjoy being the star of this little circus, Ma. Let's see how long you can keep it up. You always loved being the martyr." Click. Just that. She deleted it without hesitation, then whispered to no one, "I'm not the martyr. I'm the survivor." The courtroom was colder than before. Not in temperature, but in tension. Loretta sat straight-backed in the gallery, dressed in dark gray, her silver hair pinned with exacting care. Beside her, Hazel clutched a thermos she hadn't touched. Miriam sat 2 seats down, taking notes without looking away from the front. All eyes were on Chantel Ross. She walked to the stand like her feet weighed twice what they should, every step deliberate. Her coat had been replaced with a charcoal blazer, the same one from her interview. Her hands trembled only once, when she raised her right one for the oath. Prosecutor Banks stepped forward with the rhythm of a man who didn't need to warm up. "Ms. Ross, how did you come to know Mr. Derek Miles?" "He contacted my agency in June," Chantel said. "Said his mother needed supplemental night care after a blood pressure episode. The agency matched me with the case." "And what did that arrangement include?" "Vitals, dosage preparation monitoring her sleep cycle, no sedatives without prior approval, just routine elder care." Banks nodded. "At what point did Mr. Miles speak to you outside of that agreement?" The air tightened. Chantel's eyes flicked to the jury box, then to the recorder light blinking near the court clerk's desk. 3 weeks in, she said. He asked to talk outside the house, said he had a proposition, offered $20,000 if I made her comfortable enough not to wake up. A collective inhale rippled across the courtroom. Someone in the press row stopped typing. "And did you agree?" Banks asked. "No," Chantel said firmly. "I stalled. Said I'd need time. I didn't know what to do, but I never intended to hurt her." He walked to the evidence table, picked up a small Bluetooth speaker, and pressed play. Derek's voice poured into the room, confident, casual, unmistakably cruel. "Just ease it in the drip. She's been tired anyway. It'll look natural. You'll be gone before they even notice. 20 up front, 10 when it's done. It's painless. It's clean." When the clip ended, silence echoed like an accusation. Banks let the quiet hang. Then, "Ms. Ross, why didn't you go through with it?" Chantel's mouth quivered, but she kept her chin up. "Because of her. Loretta," she said, turning her head slightly toward the gallery. "She reminded me of my own mother. The way she thanked me, the way she noticed when I looked tired. She asked if I had enough to eat." She swallowed hard. "She's the only reason I didn't do it." Banks nodded, stepped back. No further questions. The judge looked to the defense table. Derek's attorney, a man whose tie looked tighter than his expression, rose slowly. "Ms. Ross," he said, "you're here today under an immunity agreement, correct?" "Yes." "You were paid money by my client. Did you spend any of it?" "No," she said. "I saved it as evidence, and turned it in." "You recorded him without consent?" "Yes." "You misled him, strung him along." "I protected her," Chantel said, voice rising for the first time. "And myself." The lawyer opened his mouth, then paused. He closed his folder. No further questions. Chantel looked down as she stepped off the stand, then glanced back once, straight at Loretta. Her eyes filled, but she didn't break. "She didn't deserve any of it," she said, not to the court, but to the woman who had once offered her tea and asked about her shift. Loretta's eyes misted. One tear slipped quietly down her cheek. Derek never looked up. He stared at the floor like it might forgive him. Later that afternoon, the jury was dismissed for the day. But they didn't file out like a pack of strangers. They left in fragments, some pausing by the prosecution table, others glancing at Loretta as if she'd been recast from victim to symbol. In the hallway, a mother gripped her teenage son's hand a little tighter as they passed the courtroom door. And in the evening news coverage, something shifted. Public sentiment tipped. They didn't just believe her. They began to grieve with her. Loretta sat at her kitchen table that night, the folded letter to Derek untouched. She didn't add to it. She didn't need to. The final word had already been said. Loretta walked to the witness stand with the same careful steps she once used to carry a tray of morphine in a trembling ward. Balanced, quiet, precise. The bailiff held out the Bible. Her hand didn't shake. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth?" "I do." The oath sealed like a door closing behind her. She eased into the chair, hands folded in her lap. Her scarf was dark navy. Her expression unreadable. Prosecutor Banks approached slowly. No theatrics. Just presence. He adjusted his glasses, then nodded once. "Mrs. Miles," he said, voice calm. "Do you remember the night of July 14th? "Yes," Loretta replied. "It was humid. I'd just finished my crossword. Hazel had left early. Chantel was on the night shift. Can you walk us through what happened?" Loretta's voice didn't tremble. "I was reading in bed when I felt lightheaded. At first I thought it was just my blood sugar, but then my arms went cold. My vision narrowed, like looking through the wrong end of binoculars. My body didn't feel like mine anymore." She paused, her gaze not on Banks, not on the jury, but somewhere beyond the courtroom, as if watching herself from outside. "I remember trying to say something. I don't think the words came out. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it had been poured full of wet cement." Banks didn't interrupt. Loretta looked at the jurors now, directly. "And I remember one thing more clearly than anything. I hadn't taken anything. No medication, nothing new. I had a bottle of water on the nightstand, a crossword puzzle on my lap, and I remember thinking, this wasn't a mistake." The jury leaned forward, almost collectively. Banks stepped closer. "You've spent most of your life in nursing. Would you say you're familiar with how sedatives behave?" "I could list contraindications in my sleep," she said. "I've monitored hundreds of patients through recovery, and I've charted how midazolam interacts with blood pressure meds in elderly women, and I knew, right then, what had been done to me." He nodded. "Let's step back. You raised Derek alone, correct?" Loretta gave a small nod. "His father, Walter, died when Derek was 7. Brain aneurysm. One minute he was weeding the garden, the next he was gone. And from that point forward, I worked doubles, nights. I did what I could. He was a smart boy, curious, charming, and when he wanted something, he'd find a way to get it." Her voice thinned at the edges. "I gave him everything," she continued, gaze distant again. "A car when he didn't deserve one. Tuition even when he changed majors 3 times, a down payment on his first condo, bail once." She paused. "And I think somewhere along the way he stopped seeing those things as gifts. He saw them as dues." Banks waited a moment, then asked, "Did you ever suspect he might hurt you?" "No," she said. "Not with fists. Not even with word. Derek doesn't raise his voice." She looked directly at the jury again. "But I believe he wanted me gone. Not suddenly, slowly, with a signature, not a knife." Gasps echoed quietly from the gallery. Loretta didn't blink. Banks stepped back. "No further questions." The judge looked to the defense. Derek's lawyer stood but didn't move from the table. "No cross at this time, Your Honor." The judge gave a small nod. "You may step down." Loretta stood, turned, and looked toward her son for the first time. Derek met her eyes. Just for a second. There was no recognition, no apology, just distance, like she was a stranger who'd said too much in public. She returned to her seat, her heart steady. As the next witness was called, a court clerk passed a sealed envelope to the judge. "Just arrived from the insurance fraud division." The judge opened it. Her eyes narrowed. "Counsel, we may need a sidebar. We've just received documentation suggesting the defendant forged consent for the life insurance application." Banks stood instantly. Derek's lawyer didn't move. Loretta leaned forward, breath caught mid-lung. Miriam whispered, "That's forgery. It adds years." But Loretta wasn't thinking about years. She was thinking about the signature, and the fact that her handwriting, her real handwriting, was nothing like the one on that form. They called him Benny, full name, Bennett Calhoun, but no one had used that since high school. Now, in a borrowed blazer and sneakers too clean to be comfortable, he took the stand with the hesitance of a man who already regretted saying yes. Derek's attorney stood like he'd just been handed a life raft. Finally, someone who could put polish on the defendant's name. "Mr. Calhoun," the defense began, "how long have you known Derek Miles?" Benny cleared his throat. "Since 8th grade. We were on the same JV football team." "Would you say you know his character well?" "He's complicated, but yeah, I guess I know him." "Would you describe him as violent?" "No," Benny said quickly. "Derek's not violent." "Would you describe him as a loving son?" Benny hesitated. It was barely a second, but the jury saw it. He always talked about making his mom comfortable, said she worked too hard, that he wanted to take care of things. The defense smiled. "In your experience, is Derek the kind of man who would intentionally harm his mother?" "No," Benny said, but his voice had gone quieter. "No, I don't think so." "Thank you." The lawyer gave a satisfied nod. "Your witness." Prosecutor Banks stood slowly, adjusting his cuffs like the next 10 seconds were just warm-up stretches. "Mr. Calhoun, how often have you seen Mr. Miles in the past year?" Benny shrugged. "Few times. Holidays." "Were any of those gatherings casual? Say, poker nights, drinks with friends?" Benny nodded. "Sometimes." "Did Mr. Miles ever make jokes about money, inheritance, things of that nature?" There it was. Benny froze, the pause too long to be edited out by memory. "I don't know if you'd call them jokes." Banks tilted his head. "What would you call them?" Benny swallowed hard. He once said, after his mom had a fall, that maybe it'd be better if the will wrote itself, then laughed. We all laughed. "I thought it was just Derek being Derek." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Banks took a step closer. "Anything else?" Benny stared at the floor. "He called her a walking annuity once, said keeping her alive was like dragging around a pension that never pays out." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Banks, that line is stricken from the record. Jury will disregard the witness's last comment." But the damage was done. The jury had already heard it, and they would not forget. After the witness was excused, Miriam leaned toward Loretta in the gallery. Her voice was low, firm. "This jury sees you." Loretta didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her expression said enough. Not smugness, not satisfaction, but a steady, rooted calm. She wasn't winning. She was surviving. And survival had its own gravity. During the lunch recess, Miriam received a new email. Subject line: Ross v. Miles, civil intent to file. Chantel's lawyer had followed through. Civil claim for emotional distress, medical coercion, trauma-induced employment termination, intent to sue pending outcome of the trial. Miriam showed it to Loretta without a word. Loretta scanned it, nodded once, and turned back to her tea. "She earned that," Loretta said. "He won't get to forget her either." Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters circled the steps like gulls before a storm. One headline already floated across the courthouse monitors. "Defense witness backfires as jury hears walking annuity comment." Another blared on a tablet screen just visible through the courtroom doors. "New documents link Derek Miles to forged policy, public backlash mounts." That night, Loretta sat on her porch again, wrapped in the same heavy-knit shawl she'd worn the day after Walter's funeral. Not because she was grieving, but because it reminded her what fortitude felt like. Hazel brought her a fresh pot of tea and placed a folded note beside it. From Miriam, one line: "Be ready. Closing arguments are next, and Derek's running out of stories." Loretta picked up her cup, stared into the steam, and whispered, "Good. I've still got one more truth left." The courtroom clock ticked loud enough to make itself known. 3 hours. That's how long the jury was gone, long enough to second-guess, short enough to feel inevitable. Loretta didn't fidget. She didn't even blink much. She sat like a woman who had nothing left to lose, only truth left to honor. Hazel sat behind her, Miriam at her side, Banks at the prosecution table, tapping a capped pen once every 15 seconds like it was a war drum muffled by time. Derek sat slouched between his attorney and silence. His suit coat was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. The arrogance he used to wear like cologne had vanished, replaced by something weightless and damp, like sweat that couldn't dry. "All rise," the bailiff called. The jury filed in, faces tight, palms clenched. One juror, a woman in her late 60s, wouldn't meet Derek's gaze. Another, a young man with military posture, looked straight ahead like he was marching through fog. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, in the matter of State of North Carolina versus Derek Miles, on the charge of attempted first-degree murder, we find the defendant." He didn't pause for drama. He just said it. "Guilty." The word cracked through the room like thunder. Derek's head jerked as if it had been shouted. His hands trembled. For the first time in weeks, he looked at Loretta. She didn't look back. The foreman continued. "On the charge of financial fraud, guilty. On the charge of criminal conspiracy, guilty." The judge gave a firm nod. "Sentencing will be scheduled within 10 business days. The defendant's bail is hereby revoked. He will be remanded into custody immediately." Derek collapsed, not dramatically, but slowly, like a marionette whose strings had finally snapped. His knees buckled as the bailiff grabbed his arm and held him up. His attorney tried to speak but only managed a dry rasp. Behind him, someone in the gallery exhaled, a sound so full of tension it felt like a pipe bursting. It was Chantel. She covered her mouth, eyes shining, and leaned into the wall as if the whole courthouse might tip sideways. Loretta didn't turn to look. She stared only at the judge, not because she needed confirmation, because she needed to see what justice actually looked like when it didn't flinch. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters whispered their leads into phones. A young intern in a too-big blazer sobbed quietly into her laptop as she typed the story of the day. Banks approached Loretta, face calm but soft. "You okay?" Loretta nodded. "You don't have to speak at sentencing unless you want to." "I'll be there," she said. "Then I'll make sure he hears you." As he turned to leave, Miriam reached into her coat pocket and handed Loretta a wrapped throat lozenge. Menthol eucalyptus, her favorite. "You're safe now," Miriam said. "Officially." Loretta took the candy but didn't unwrap it. Instead, she stared at the empty witness stand where so many truths had been born and buried in the span of a few days. She whispered, barely audible, "He tried to write my ending." Miriam heard her anyway. "But you got the last word." That night, the house didn't feel as heavy. Hazel made dinner, cornbread, black-eyed peas, and roasted sweet potatoes. Loretta ate quietly, not because she was tired, but because silence, for once, wasn't the enemy. Outside, the wind chime didn't ring, not even once. No calls came, no burner messages, no threats. Just quiet, just the waiting. She sat on the porch again, same blanket, this time with tea already steeped, no sugar. The letter to Derek sat in her lap, still sealed. She thought she might burn it, or read it again, or send it to the judge before sentencing. She hadn't decided yet, but she would, and it would be her decision. The visitation room was smaller than Loretta expected. No bars, just thick glass and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. Fluorescent lighting hummed above, casting every wrinkle, every crack, into sharp relief, the kind of space where nothing was meant to feel human. A guard escorted her in and stood near the door, stone-faced, arms crossed, no introductions, no apologies. Derek was already seated, hands cuffed to the tabletop, jail uniform wrinkled at the elbows. His eyes were rimmed red, though whether from sleep or shame, Loretta didn't guess. She sat across from him, placing her gloved hands on the table, not touching, just anchoring herself. He spoke first. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," Loretta replied. "But I've never left a room just because it made me sick." Derek's face crumpled for a second. He blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if trying to clear static. "I was desperate, Ma." His voice cracked. Everything was falling apart. The business, the house. Melissa was ready to leave. I wasn't thinking straight. "No," she said, voice low. "You were thinking clearly. You thought it out line by line. Policy forms, dosage timing, wire transfers. You weren't out of control. You were in control." He looked away. She leaned forward, each word exact. "You studied how to erase me, Derek. You used my medical history like a blueprint, like I was a building you'd already condemned." His shoulders sagged. He didn't cry, not in the way he wanted to, but the tears were there, clinging to the edge of his lashes like they weren't sure they belonged to him anymore. "I didn't want to hurt you," he whispered. "You didn't want to get your hands dirty," Loretta corrected, but the goal was the same. A long silence fell between them. Then Derek asked it, the question he had probably rehearsed a dozen times in his cell. "Can't we try again? Start over?" Loretta didn't answer right away. She let him sit with the silence he'd earned. Finally, she rose, slow, deliberate. She took the envelope from her coat pocket and placed it gently on the table between them. "I forgive you," she said, "because I won't carry you with me anymore." His eyes flickered with something that might have been hope. But then she finished, "But I don't forget. And I won't pretend you're still my son in the ways that count." Derek's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a child who had broken something expensive and just realized there was no gluing it back. She didn't wait for him to speak again. She turned to the guard and nodded. As the officer opened the door, she said one final thing without looking back. "You tried," she said. "I survived." Back at home, Loretta sat in her sunroom with Miriam. The envelope she had handed Derek hadn't contained her letter. That had been burned in the fireplace 2 nights ago. Instead, she handed a copy of it, rewritten, clearer, to Miriam now. Miriam opened it, brows rising slightly. At the top was a bold header, "Request for maximum sentencing and legal severance from estate rights of Derek Miles." She read it once, then again. "Are you sure?" Miriam asked softly. Loretta nodded. "He gets no keys, no claims, not even a footprint." "And forgiveness?" Loretta sipped her tea. "That was for me, not for Mercy." The next morning, the DA received the letter. By noon, the sentencing file had been amended with Loretta's statement attached. Strong, undeniable, not angry, just finished. And later that evening, a new filing appeared in the public record. Estate executor files motion to remove Derek Miles from all inheritance and power of attorney preclaims. Outside, the porch wind chime finally stirred. A slow breeze, a single note, the kind that only rings when something is truly over. But Loretta didn't hear it. She was asleep for once. No fear in her chest, no unfinished words in her hands. The courtroom was half full, but the silence made it feel packed wall to wall. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a single click of a pen. Derek sat at the defense table in his uniform, wrists cuffed, face pale, eyes bloodshot but dry. His lawyer sat beside him, unreadable. At the front, Judge Palmer adjusted her glasses, unfolded a printed page, and cleared her throat. "This court has received a statement from the victim, Mrs. Loretta Miles. At her request, I will read it aloud before sentencing," she began. "I do not stand here to punish. That's the court's job. I do not speak today to plead. That's for those who still believe someone can change. I am here only to name what happened. So history doesn't get rewritten by the one who tried to erase me." Murmurs shifted faintly through the gallery. The judge continued. "He used my trust as blueprint, my kindness as a lever, and my health as cover for cruelty. That is not grief. That is strategy. That is not a mistake. That is malice measured in milligrams." Banks didn't move. Miriam sat, hands clasped tight. "I forgive because I refuse to let this bitterness outlive me, but I request, with full voice and full clarity, that this court assign the maximum penalty allowed, and that no inheritance, legacy, or benefit tied to my name ever reaches his hands, not out of spite, but to mark the line between blood and loyalty." Judge Palmer folded the page and laid it gently on the bench. "In the matter of State versus Derek Miles," she said, On charges of attempted first-degree murder, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit medical homicide, this court sentences the defendant to 17 years in the custody of the Department of Corrections. Eligibility for parole shall not begin before year 12. Bail remains revoked. Civil hearings may proceed concurrently. The gavel fell. Once. Sharp. Final. Derek didn't look at Loretta, didn't beg. He just dropped his head into his hands and stayed there as 2 guards led him from the room. Outside, the sky was gray but clean. A breeze moved. Through the trees, not the howling wind of drama, but the kind of breeze that follows rain. Loretta stepped into it quietly, arm looped with Miriam's. Chantel followed close behind, coat cinched at the waist. They didn't speak. They just walked. Out of the courthouse, down the steps, through the last ring of camera flashes and muttered headlines. Miriam's arm tightened slightly as a reporter called out, "Mrs. Miles, do you have anything to say now that justice is served?" Loretta didn't break stride. But as they reached the car, she paused, turned slightly. "Justice isn't served," she said. "It's guarded, and some of us are the ones standing watch." That evening, Hazel greeted her at the door with a warm plate. Baked chicken, collard greens, sweet potato mash, the kind of meal that healed in layers. "No speeches," Hazel said softly. "Just food, just home." Loretta kissed her cheek and sat down. She didn't eat quickly. She didn't speak much, but there was no shadow behind her now, just a kind of stillness that hadn't touched her in months. The next day, Miriam received a letter from the hospital where Chantel once worked. A fund had been created. The Loretta Miles Integrity Grant, annual, staff-voted, given to a nurse who, as the board's letter read, upholds care above convenience, truth above comfort. Chantel signed the letter as co-founder. Miriam read it aloud at the breakfast table. Loretta didn't cry, she just nodded once. Then said, "We'll match it." Every year Miriam raised an eyebrow. "From where?" "From what he doesn't get," Loretta said. By sundown, the paperwork had already been drafted. Miles Foundation Scholarship Application for nurses who choose integrity, printed in thick serif font with one short quote underneath. "I survived. That doesn't mean I forget. It means I plant something better." Loretta signed it with a new pen. Clean ink. Clean lines. She stepped onto her porch that night, tea in hand. For the first time in months there was no letter on her lap. No decision waiting to be made, just her breath, her body, her name, and a world that still turned. The attorney's office was quiet. Mid-morning sun poured through tall windows, and the air smelled faintly of lemon oil and paper. Loretta sat across from Miriam at the signing table. No frills, no ceremony, just ink, weight, and decision. "Are you sure?" Miriam asked, though she already knew the answer. Loretta nodded. "They earned it, not with blood, with presence." She signed the final page. 2 new names beneath hers, Hazel Bryant and Chantel Ross, listed not as caregivers or dependents, but as co-beneficiaries, co-heirs. No mention of Derek, no footnote, no fallback clause, no apologies. Miriam sealed the packet and placed it in her briefcase. "It's done," she said. "No," Loretta corrected gently. "It's begun." That afternoon, she met with a representative from the bank. They walked the edges of her property, discussing refinance options, equity releases, long-term interest exemptions for nonprofit transfer. The math worked in her favor. The equity from her home would fund the next 10 years of the Miles Foundation scholarship, enough for a dozen full rides to nursing students who didn't have family support or political clout. Just grit. She signed the agreement on the hood of her car, beneath a sky that didn't threaten storm. Later that week, she wandered into the garden. The one Walter had built by hand. The stone path, the climbing roses, the fig tree that refused to die even after 2 winters of frost. The trellis still stood, though a little crooked now. She reached down to clear some weeds and found, buried beneath the leaves, one of the original markers Walter had carved into the soil border. The word etched in wood, faded but legible. Steady. She smiled, pressing her palm against it. "We raised a man who chose darkness," she whispered, "but I survived it." I outlived what he planned, and I get to choose what comes next. Sunday came, and with it, roast chicken and green beans and Chantel's banana pudding that never set right but always disappeared first. They ate in Loretta's kitchen, plates clinking, voices soft. Chantel called every week now. Hazel stayed on as night nurse, though, truthfully, it was more companionship than care at this point. Still, she cooked, folded towels, and filled the house with warmth that didn't ask for anything back. That night, as they cleared the table, Hazel opened a shoebox. "I've scanned about half of them," she said, setting a thumb drive beside Loretta's tea. "My journals?" Loretta blinked. "You're serious?" "We're halfway to a memoir," Hazel said. "People need to read what survival sounds like." Loretta held the drive in her palm like it was heavier than it looked. In the weeks that followed, the hospice center across town hosted a small ceremony. Loretta was there, scarf pinned just right, spine straight. They unveiled a new plaque beside the entryway. The Loretta Miles Garden for Patient Dignity, donated by nurses, maintained by students, visited by families. Loretta didn't speak at the mic. She just touched the bronze and whispered, "Let them bloom." Late one evening, after everyone had gone home and the dishwasher had finished its last cycle, Loretta sat at her kitchen table alone, not lonely, just quiet. She reread one of her earliest journal entries, scanned now, printed on crisp white paper. "Fear is loud, but clarity whispers, and sometimes it's the whisper that saves you." She folded it and slipped it back into its folder. Then, with slow hands, she turned off the kitchen light and stepped onto the porch. The wind chime danced gently. Hazel had fixed it last week. Loretta looked up at the stars. No letter in her lap, no calls, no dread, just the soft thrum of life unburdened. She whispered, not to the night, but to the part of herself that had waited the longest. "He paid for my ending. I lived to see his, and built better from it."